everybody. This is Baron with OneChiropractic. Again, we're continuing this series on neurologically based chiropractic with Dr. Richard Barwell. So, man, we're starting to get in the thick of it now. So if you watched our last session, we started breaking into really universal intelligence, innate intelligence, really giving you the facts about those terms. And then we're just going to keep this conversation going, Doc. And so, help me understand, really the scientific challenge of this. Like, how do we get into, we broke those things down in understanding universal and innate, but what does that do to the neurology side of all of this?
Okay. Well, we've covered the art, the misdirection of the art. And for the first, I forget what, something like 7 years, chiropractic was strictly based on art. And then from that point until 2000, the year 2000, it was based on philosophy, until basically I came along with the neurologically based chiropractic, and based on the research we did, and went like, holy cow, we need to change our foundation and understanding of the science. So we need to get down now to the science and really start talking about how that scientific portion comes into play. So let's start with the first slide here so we can get to being on track. And so we talked about this neural integrity. We talked about we talked about the innate expression at the cell level, at the system level, and at the organ level, and the role of neural integrity, where all of that had to be working in unison. So that means this. When integrity means being complete or whole, it means that the nervous system has to be functioning ideally at all levels. Optimal cell-to-cell and system-to-system communication is critical. It's absolutely critical. The higher we can get that level of neural integrity, the healthier we're going to be, because we'll be able to adapt and respond to changes in our environment due to the various stressors in our life. Mm-hmm. But with this comes this thing called ideal neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity gets used in all sorts of ways. What it really means is that we have this incredible nervous system that is able to build new neural connections and pathways that help us improve to deal with the various stressors in our life. Our ability to adapt and respond and build these solid pathways. There isn't an issue that happens within the brain. And what happens in the brain is that it doesn't self-regulate. And so it tends to build responses, and you get a pathway built in there that gets stuck. And so once it gets stuck, it keeps relating back to that particular issue. For instance, if you were a child and got bit by a boxer dog, okay, now you've got an inherent fear of boxer dogs, and every time you see one, your memory patterns in the cortex say, I know that dog. Get ready, and it'll send a message to the limbic system that'll put the limbic system into sympathetic defenses. Mm-hmm. And it gets stuck into that pattern. And we didn't know how we could change those patterns until just recently. And the decade of the brain that came along I think this was in the 1990s, was incredible, because it opened up an understanding of brain function like we've never had before. Then came the decade of consciousness, and it's just continued to grow. And it's moved, everything that's happened in that has moved towards chiropractic and who we are and what we do.
That's right.
And it puts us in the strongest position we've ever been in, as long as we're willing to listen and understand that we need to adapt. So the scientific challenge that we have, we hit the arts challenge, we hit the philosophy challenge. Here's the scientific challenge. There is no consideration as to how the vertebral subluxation came into being. We just accepted that it was there, and it was our job to find it and pound it down. Mm-hmm. And it's, I'm being a little facetious there, but our job was truly, that was it, to find where the subluxation was, palpate it out, and then make a correction at that level. Well, even BJ said just because it's got a misalignment doesn't mean that that's a subluxation, because there has to be a neurological involvement to make a subluxation. Well, how are you going to tell it was a neurological involvement?
Right.
So there were some challenges that went along with that. So the effectiveness of light force techniques in getting the same level of response was never considered in chiropractic. As a matter of fact, what chiropractic tended to do, I remember when the activator came out, there was a huge foo-for-rah about that's not chiropractic. Mm-hmm. And if you accept that chiropractic is strictly finding and correcting manually vertebral subluxations, it really restricts who you are as a chiropractor. Yep. I don't know where the rest of it's going to fit, but we have to take a look at it. So there's no consideration is the fact that post measurements are limited to patient responses.
Yeah.
We had nothing really to depend on except along came x-rays.
Mm-hmm.
And then we could take a look at x-rays, but the majority of times we didn't see any changes in post x-rays, so everybody stopped doing them. We all did them to begin with so we could show people there was a problem. And that's true. It's a great history lesson to how long this system has been malfunctioning. There's no doubt about it. The x-rays have a value on that basis. But the other post measurements were, Mrs. Jones, you're feeling better, see, chiropractic works. Yep. And then there came that statement, and I've heard myself making this, saying, all we need to know is the chiropractic works. We don't need to know why. We just need to know it works. And I have to keep reminding myself that I'm the idiot that said that. So, you know, I'm in the trenches with the rest of the people going like, yeah, I heard it somewhere, thought it was great, so I repeated it without thinking about it.
Well, I'll just say this, and I know you'll disagree, but I want to get the point across. You may not have to, but you should want to. Right? I mean, you may not, as an individual, you may not have to, but you should want to know that. That's where certainty comes from. That's what gets you through those tough times. That's what gets you through that tough patient is if you know why you're doing what you're doing, you know, just exactly like you were talking about with the brain and its adaptability, that's what you should be doing in practice. If you understand, again, what is the intent of what you're doing in your office, that allows you to adapt and find the right mechanism to create the best result. And so you may not have to, but you sure should want to.
Oh, I agree with you because, you know, in wanting to, that's the only way you're going to improve.
Right. I agree.
If you want to know why it worked better, then you're going to be able to help the next person because you understand it better.
That's exactly.
So it really, and that chiropractic's too easy.
Yep.
It's just far too easy to get good results with people.
Yeah.
You know, and that's part of our problem.
Yep. I agree.
And D says there's no justification then for care beyond symptom relief. So here's the problem. You know, as a scientific challenge, if your job is strictly to get rid of their signs or symptoms and they're gone, so is the patient gone.
That's right.
There's no justification for you to establish lifetime wellness care if you don't have any reason for taking care of them.
That's right.
If you're improving neurological function, when does that stop?
Never.
Never. Okay, so that's why it's really important for us to say, listen, you know, we all know that people that stay under long-term chiropractic care experience better health. Okay, we know that. All you have to do is be in practice for a while and have people under regular care to see what happens.
That's right.
But, you know, if you're only seeing people for symptom only, you never get to that. So the dialogue moved then from subluxation to vertebral subluxation to vertebral subluxation complex from my dear friend, Joe Felicia, who I love Joe. I used to take care of him. I was his chiropractor. He was one of my mentors. But that whole concept of vertebral subluxation complex was just something that he dreamed up.
Yeah.
And if you take a look at it, the flow of it doesn't work because it puts vertebral subluxation first. Right. Well, how did that happen? We have to ask the question how that happened, because if something happened to create that, we're not taking care of the cause, we're taking care of the symptom, and therefore we need to go back and take a look at what was the cause and how do we deal with the cause as chiropractors, because we deal with it absolutely at the cause.
Yep.
Okay. Lacking supportive evidence, the profession moved from a neurological foundation to a structural base, and I was at chiropractic college when all this was happening. The colleges, at that time, they weren't universities, they were all colleges, started to realize that they were in jeopardy because they were being challenged scientifically to prove that the vertebral subluxation was the cause of all illness and disease. They knew they couldn't do it. And so what they did was they started moving us towards mechanical models and structural-based models. And that was just so for survival. They weren't doing it out of malice. They were saying, we got a problem here and we need to be shifting this because we're going to continue to get challenged. Well, then it moved from the structural base to joint mechanics, and now it's really headed to physical therapy for those that have said, listen, I just can't buy any of the philosophy of chiropractic whatsoever. I can't buy any of that stuff. And now they're just going to end up doing physical therapy under the role of medicine.
And here's what people need to understand as well with human behavior. And, you know, I teach this when I teach a lot of my documentation classes. that we've got to acknowledge for the first probably 100 years of our profession, we were pretty focused on just telling the story of chiropractic and just breaking it down, sharing the philosophy why we were separate and distinct during all this time of states getting their own licensure and docs getting thrown in jail, all that stuff up until about the 80s. And then all of a sudden, it kind of tipped, right? Then Medicare acknowledged chiropractic, then Major Med started covering it. We got our own codes, and we had what we called the Mercedes 80s, which was, everyone was just getting paid and people were getting adjusted. It was a beautiful period of time. And then all of a sudden managed care hit, and they took it all away from us. Like within a fail swoop, we were just as busy, but they cut our income in half. From that moment on, the profession of chiropractic has really been about reimbursement. It just has. And so my point in all of this is saying one of the reasons it's moving to mechanics and physical therapy and why people are starting to no longer bill the adjustment code, they get paid better for therapy codes, right? And this is my frustration, but yet you wonder why chiropractic's not respected. Well, on a claim form, when you look no different than a PT, but a PT's in a hospital group or has a referral from an MD, we've created this box that we've put our profession in. And it all boils down to what we're talking about here, which is understanding what our true intent is. When we start communicating properly about why we're doing what we're doing, all these games and reimbursement, all that stuff goes away because that now becomes a side effect of us telling our message, which our message now breeds value, which will breed reimbursement. But when you're doing the same thing that someone down the street's doing, that devalues why they should pay you any differently, right? So it's a cyclical circle that we've created.
And it got even worse when you stop and think about how you get reimbursed. You have to have a diagnostic code.
Correct, right. And
which
you're now treating a condition, right?
That was the killer right there.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it became more about money than it became about patients. And the neurological role in chiropractic adjustment became lost. And so they've removed neurology now from all of it because they don't understand it. And these are supposed to be educated people. If you don't change the nervous system, nothing happens. I don't care if you take a drug; it changes the nervous system.
That's exactly what it does.
That's what's going on here.
Yeah, I agree.
And when you go and have surgery, you end up going in rehab. What do they do in rehab? They retrain the nervous system.
Yep.
So here's the points at this particular level. So our philosophy differentiates us from the practice of medicine. That's critical to me. I do not want to be understood as a medical profession. I want to stay separate. I think chiropractic deserves it.
Yep.
Universal intelligence dynamics create a hostile environment. Intelligence is expressed to the organization of energy. That's what the adjustment does. It organizes the central nervous system at its highest level to be able to cope with a hostile environment. Evolution develops to the expression of intelligence. We continue to improve. To me, it was fascinating that the twins, the astronauts, one of them went up into space, came back down after he'd been in space for a time. His genetic code is no longer the same as his twins. They're no longer twins.
Huh.
They evolved in that hostile environment up there. He had to adapt.
Yeah.
The genetic code is different. That's the expression of innate.
Yeah.
That's the God within us.
Yep.
Innate intelligence maintains its life in a hostile environment. That's the points we want to make. That's where we play the game of chiropractic.
That's awesome. Man, I tell you what, this stuff just gets me going every time we get into these conversations, Doc. And we've been going at this together now for a couple of years now, and it just never gets old. So, man, I hope you guys are enjoying this series. Man, I hope as we get a little bit deeper into this stuff that you're starting to find a little bit more truth within yourself. And man, but again, we're just touching the iceberg. We're going to start breaking into really what the subluxation is as we continue through this process and understanding those elements so that you can communicate with intelligence as we move forward. So Dr. Barwell, as always, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. We're going to keep going down this series, man. Who knows how long this thing's going to go? We're going to keep breaking it up into chunks and keep sending it out. So we appreciate everyone taking the time. Send it to your colleagues. We need this to be an infestation throughout the profession. It needs to just go viral so people start hearing this information and changing their consciousness of what's going on. But we've got even more great stuff to share with you down the road. So we appreciate you. Enjoy your day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. God bless.